Have you ever hit a roadblock in business because of money, time, lack of staff, or even onerous regulation? Do you have a rebellious streak that makes you want to find unconventional solutions? Then you might just love this week's business book review. The Four Workarounds by Paulo Savaget examines how scrappy organizations throughout the world have found ways to subvert the status quo and get big things done. And later in this review, I'm going to reveal how hackers' secret methods might be holding the key to solving your biggest business challenges. But first, let me explain what a workaround actually is. I think the best definition of a workaround would be the process of getting things done with an unconventional approach that prioritizes the outcome over the process to actually do it. Now, Paulo has identified 4 of these workarounds, and I'm going to share those with you in just a minute. But first, I want to share with you how I discovered this book. I learned about the 4 workarounds because Paulo is a professor at the University of Oxford and teaches systems thinking. This topic was one of the most fascinating of all of the subjects that I studied while getting my MBA at Oxford, and I've even reviewed other books on the subject inside this series. My favorite was Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows, and I'll make sure I include a link to that book review in the description. Now, most books on systems thinking focus on big, complex, global issues. This sometimes makes it hard to translate the techniques into entrepreneurial concepts, but the 4 Workarounds was written at an entrepreneurial level. Now, granted, most of the examples that he uses are still related to global challenges, but he highlights the entrepreneurs who use workarounds to solve global problems that have some sort of commercial value inside their solutions. And much like most books written by Oxford professors, he rarely tells you what anything means to you specifically or what to think about something, but instead he communicates how to think versus what to think, right? So the examples in the book give you information in such a way that your thinking reveals the true lessons for you specifically. I give this book a strong 5 out of 5 head tilts. It's an excellent book, and I think it would be a perfect book, 5 out of 5, for anybody crossing the desert, going into a performance or growth style business. And here's why. I think some of the workarounds also require enough creative bandwidth and sometimes financial connections or what have you to be able to produce the results. So if you're in the wilderness and struggling, I think the workarounds would be useful, but you might be wondering how they apply to you. Whereas if you're crossing from a lifestyle over into a performance or growth style company, I think you're going to be able to need some of these strategies to compete with the big dogs that are out there. So I think it's a perfect book for anybody crossing the desert wanting to get into a growth or a performance style enterprise. By the way, if you're not sure what phase the entrepreneurial journey you're in, or even if you just want to know more about it, check out my business book scorecard. It's a free Q&A that takes just a few minutes, and at the end, you're going to get a custom curated list of the top 10 books for you based upon where you're at in your specific entrepreneurial journey. You know, the reality is all books can be a 5 out of 5 if you read them at the right time in your business development. So why waste time reading books that don't apply directly to you? I've already sorted through over 500 business books to share with you the top 10 books that apply directly to you. It's fast, it's free, and the link is inside the description of this video. Now, as promised, let's look at Paulo's 4 workarounds. The first one is the Piggyback. This workaround enables us to circumvent all sorts of obstacles and address our problems by using seemingly unrelated relationships. Number 2 is the loophole, which capitalizes on an ambiguity or uses an unconventional set of rules when they aren't the most obviously applicable. Number 3 is the roundabout. This one disturbs and redirects positive feedback loops, which lead to self-reinforced behaviors. And admittedly, that's a little bit of systems thinking jargon in there. You might have to read a book on systems thinking to understand what self-reinforcing loops are, but let's keep going. The 4th one is the next best thing, which are designed to get the job done with minimal fuss. Now, I realized I didn't go into a lot of depth on each one of those 4 workarounds, and that's precisely because the majority of the book is dedicated to a rich understanding of each one of them. If I were to go into any level of detail, it might give you a false sense of understanding of what they actually are. And believe me, each workaround is filled with a lot of nuance. So I'd rather this review spark your curiosity than satiate it, right? But let me share with you several powerful quotes from the book that really stood out to me. Deviance is different and more transformative than disobedience. This distinction is crucial. It's not just about saying no to established rules, but about creating entirely new pathways that transform how we approach problems. Second, on how rules shape our thinking. We are conformists, not necessarily because we choose to be, but because rules make us numb. Rules serve a purpose. Rules save us from cognitive burden of reasoning and deliberating in every situation of our lives. They help us know how to respond without having to think much. They create predictability and familiarity, and for that exact reason, we usually don't pay attention to how they shape the ways we think and behave. This explains why we often fail to question established process even when they're clearly not working for us. Our brains are wired to conserve energy by following present patterns. Third, on shifting from blaming individuals to examining systems. When we move away from individual blame, we observe that the root causes of our problems reside in all sorts of rules, formal or informal, authoritative or customary, that shape how we think and act and what society expects of us. That is why we are better off on examining and defying the rules of the game instead of blaming the players. It isn't only fairer, it's also much more effective. This is particularly relevant in business when something isn't working. We often look for who to blame instead of examining the underlying structures that created the problem in the first place. Fourth, on embracing ambiguity. We have to embrace ambiguity. We must recognize that we make decisions without having the full picture, and that we are better off pondering and defying our assumptions than thoughtlessly building on them. This might be the most valuable insight for entrepreneurs, by the way. The willingness to operate with incomplete information and continuously challenge your own assumptions is what separates successful innovators from those who just get stuck. All right, fifth, on breaking out of default thinking. When people encounter the same kinds of problems multiple times and use the same default solutions to address these problems, they become numb to alternatives. This perfectly captures why innovation stalls in many companies. We get comfortable with our standard solutions even when they're not optimal. And finally, on the continuous nature of problem solving. We are better off if we stop fixating on ideal one-off solutions and focus instead on addressing our problems adaptively, continuously, and imaginatively. And workarounds may unlock the process of ongoing change that the world needs. This represents a fundamental shift in thinking about solutions from seeing them as fixed endpoints to viewing them as ongoing processes of adaptation and improvement. You know, I believe that most entrepreneurs are inherently rebellious. It's most likely what gave them the crazy notion to start a business. The Four Workarounds embraces that rebellious nature that exists in the world of entrepreneurship. And now for the connection that I teased earlier about hackers. What does that have to do with this? Well, when Paulo started his research on the subject, it wasn't in the world of rebellious entrepreneurs. He was actually interested in how hackers have been able to create change within complex systems. And he wanted to know if we could learn from hackers and deploy their methods to address the world's most urgent and high-stakes socio-environmental challenges. In this book, he refers to these hackers as scrappy organizations. And when you think about it, that's likely a perfect description for most startups in business, right? The main notion of workarounds is finding ways to get big things done against insurmountable odds. If you read it, I hope you can come back and share in the comments some of the sections that stood out for you so anybody watching this could benefit from your insights as well. And if you found this helpful, hit the like button and subscribe so the next time that I release a review, you're going to be one of the first people to know. Until the next review, let's both try a little harder to be a little better. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch that book review. If you liked it, I think you might like this one as well. Check it out.